Dr. Karla Turner expanding the parameters of the alien-human abduction agenda. Born in Arkansas in 1947, Karla Turner grew up in the South but has lived in a number of other areas of the United States as well as in India and England. After receiving a Master's of Art from the University of Nottingham, England, Dr. Turner earned a Ph.D. in English from the University of North Texas, Denton, Texas, and taught college English courses at the University of North Texas and Cook County College, Gainesville, Texas for over a decade. Dr. Turner's involvement with ufology began in 1988 after a UFO sighting and a series of alien encounters. The story of her family's experiences is told in her book Into the Fringe, Berkeley, 1992. Expanding the parameters of the alien-human abduction agenda. My experiences as an abductee and my subsequent work with other abduction reports has shown me that ufology's current understanding of the abduction phenomenon underestimates the situation. This paper will present the need for an expanded definition of the abduction scenario and will illustrate those aspects which are not commonly known or discussed. Primary illustrations will come from a group of 8 female abductees whose reports are presented in Taken, but other reports are also considered. Correlations of abduction accounts indicate the need for serious investigations into the sexual activities foisted upon abductees, into the technological aspects of alien-human interactions, and into the involvement of human agents and organizations with abductees. This paper will also discuss evidence of perceptive changes that may be occurring in the human species in response to the intrusive stress of the abduction agenda. Introduction. I am an abductee. I have been forcibly taken and controlled by non-human entities. I am also a researcher of abduction reports, and since 1988 I have investigated numerous cases, first with Barbara Bartholic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then independently, throughout Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas, as well as other parts of the country. The correlation of evidence from these reports clearly indicates the need for abduction research to accept wider boundaries for this phenomenon than those currently perceived. On this 25th anniversary of MUFON, we have a wonderful opportunity to assess our progress in the field and to reassess the evidence in the abduction scenario. Initially, early reports concerning the alien abduction of humans were dismissed altogether, even by those who actively investigated UFO sightings and landing reports. After a few well-known accounts became public, however, researchers reluctantly accepted the possibility of very rare events involving alien-human interactions, and these were explained as discrete scientific forays by the aliens as they studied our species. As more and more abduction reports came to light through the years, the perceived view of the phenomenon had to expand, to admit that these events were not so rare after all, that they seemed to be a part of many people's lives. The thought at this time was that such events were suppressed in the memories of most abductees, and, as Bud Hopkins wrote in his book Intruders, it was thought that after a person recalled the suppressed events they would cease, as if somehow they were always in the past. Finally, however, researchers realized that the abductions did not necessarily stop after the abductee woke up to the fact of the experiences, but that they continued, involving lifelong contacts, clustering in families over a number of generations, and even reaching out on occasion to include acquaintances of the abductees. This situation was not seen, at first, to represent a real threat to people, because early published accounts of these reports indicated that the aliens were merely borrowing us for genetic and reproductive purposes, in order to revivify their degenerating species. A variant view of the ongoing abduction scenario evolved which said that the aliens are our spiritual superiors here to assist the human race in its upward progression. These two general attitudes, then, are where current, mainstream abduction research basically stands today, but are these stances adequately supported by the evidence? The evidence forces me to conclude that they are not, that our current assumptions are unsubstantiated and too narrow, and that we must revise our thinking to fit all of the data, rather than having the data ignored, restricted, or reshaped to fit the theories. I'd like to read 3 brief excerpts from my latest book, Taken Inside the Alien-Human Abduction Agenda, which typify reports that are pushing the limits of our understanding the phenomenon. From Indiana, 1954. They came in our house and set up equipment. In the living room, Pat said. the army men wanted to talk to me the most. Me, an 11-year-old girl with secrets in my head. But the aliens told me I couldn't tell, because there will be those who will tamper with your mind. And here they were, the tamperers, the army men. 2 female doctors set up their gear in the bedroom, where Pat was given an injection. It made me sleepy, she said, and I lay on my mum's bed on some towels and told them my story. I even told them, "You're in my mum's room where the white, glowing ones were. You don't belong here, but they do." From Puerto Rico, 1978, 2 aliens took Beth down a curved hall, and through a door into a different area. It looked like a surgery room, and she became afraid they were going to kill her there. A third entity, holding a black box, moved to a position behind Beth. She could not see what he did, but she felt as if her head were being opened and her brain removed, all without any sensation of pain. After she was all put back together again, a cold liquid was poured over her head. When this procedure was finished, the aliens stood in front of her, and Beth realized that mentally she was different. Her thoughts about everything were changed, and she was filled with new ideas about God and the unity of all life within that supreme source. This very spiritual moment was followed by quite a physical exam, as the aliens took samples from her skin and hair. A human-looking man with a widow's peak hairline entered and made a full examination of her body, including a gynecological procedure. Then he explained many things, telling her that she and other humans had been chosen to carry out certain jobs for the aliens in the future. From Texas, 1992, the masked alien explained that her race had been doing things to humans that they should not be doing, Amy said. She and several groups of her race and others wanted to stop the abuse of the humans by her race. They were working with certain people on Earth to stop the process. The other humans in the room were ex-pilots, military officials, and other professionals. They were all working together to stop the alien intrusions. She showed me the things she had pulled out of my neck and said, "This is embedded deep in the spinal cord." The thing controlled the muscles of the body when activated. It blocked the brain and became the central command of the body. I don't want to remember how or why this thing functioned. These 3 scenarios were reported by abductees whose many other experiences, delineated and taken, fit well within the accepted view, and in all 3 cases there were corroborating evidence and effects that place their overall reports in a valid light. Yet the details of these particular episodes do not fit neatly into the limited strictures of the crossbreeding theories nor those of the spiritual theories. Such reports are often ignored, but the fact is that there is no confirmably reliable basis for such scenarios to be discarded and other parts of the same person's accounts to be accepted as valid. Details like these come from too many abductees, with and without the use of hypnotic regression, are often multiply witnessed, frequently leave physical after effects, and are in fact intrinsically part of the same fabric from which the more familiar and accepted details are taken, such as the physical exams, the sperm and ova harvests, baby presentations, and scientific or metaphysical communications. As both an abductee and researcher, I've become intimately aware that some researchers variously discount certain aspects of the reported data, such as those cited above, because of personal intellectual, scientific, or spiritual strictures, and also because of personal needs and fears on the part of the researchers and abductees alike. Nonetheless, these uncomfortable reports are made by abductees for which the events are as real as any of the other incidents they relate. On this occasion of reflection and assessment, we should be able to take a fresh look at the entire body of data. When considered seriously, they may prompt us into new avenues of research and a new openness to the possibilities. First, however, I'd like to applaud the efforts of those who have taken a scientific approach to ufology as a whole. Their efforts have included investigations of sightings reports, photos, videos, landing traces, implants, crop circles, animal mutilations, and government documents. These activities, carried on for almost 50 years by many serious and intelligent researchers, have amassed important data. They have done so, for the most part, without the help of the mainstream scientific community, which doesn't seem to have the intellectual courage to question its own biases. and they have managed, in spite of institutionalized neglect and ridicule, to learn a great deal about several aspects of the phenomenon. Scientific investigations into crop circle formations, animal mutilations, and UFO landing traces, for example, have given us significant information about various effects on plant structure changes and some aspects of alien technology. But we must also face the fact that from this great effort we have not uncovered indisputably convincing answers to the primary questions: who and what are these beings in the UFOs? Where do they originate? And why are they here, interacting with our flora, fauna, and families? I also want to recognize the great gains which have been made in the specific area of abduction therapy, providing help and support for those who are living with the phenomenon and working to resolve their emotional trauma, to keep the disruption of their everyday lives to a minimum, and to transform or assimilate these experiences in a positive way. I have benefited from such efforts, as have my husband and son, so my thanks is very personal and heartfelt. But as an abductee, I also understand that abduction therapy is not necessarily the same as abduction research. Therapy's goal is one of personal balance, while the goal of research is a larger, clearer understanding of the phenomenon. There is a serious need for both approaches to expand their efforts. In addition to learning to live with abductions, we even more urgently need to find out why they happen, what they mean, and whether and how the situation can be altered. The need for reliable answers is nowhere greater than in the abduction phenomenon. It intimately affects people of all ages and backgrounds, irrevocably altering their personal lives and their perceptions of reality, and it raises immense questions about our human past, present, and future. But in spite of the best scientific approaches to the question, all that ufological research has brought to most people is a realization that UFOs exist, and perhaps some cute, harmless ETs, but no confrontation with what this means. Science has been trying to measure a dream, it seems, using traditional ideas and practices, and it has proven elusive. The UFO phenomenon is not confined to our current scientific understanding of perceived reality. We do not yet have the technology or natural perceptive abilities to capture and assess it. That is why the scientific approach to photographic evidence, landing traces, implants, and document analysis has so little to offer in the way of decisive results. It is in the abduction scenario that we come most intimately face-to-face with the alien presence, and thus have our best opportunity to observe the activity and assess its purpose or agenda. All of the UFO photos in the world tell us nothing compared to the words of those who have encountered the alien force in their lives. It is true that abduction research has yet to produce hard answers, but there are certainly different theories to be had, almost an embarrassment of riches. Unfortunately, these theories rest on partial, selective uses of the data, rather than dealing with the complexities of the entire, lifelong and minute-by-minute, realities of the abduction experience. It is more than the sum of its parts. The intermittent UFO sightings, missing time episodes, conscious encounters, and virtual reality scenarios are like blank milestones on a journey which, for the abductee, is continuous and headed in an unknown direction. More accurately, they are like lights that suddenly appear in the dark, which we hope will shed illumination and lead to understanding. Instead, however, these startling lights either blind us with their intensity, so that we cannot see their source, or they cast strange shadows, whose false appearances and misleading movements can easily confuse and disorient us. No one knows this better than an abductee. Investigators who have not had personal experiences with the phenomenon can listen to abduction accounts and then ponder the possibilities. Was the person lying? Was it a real event, or did it occur on a mental level? What parts of the recollection are accurate, and which are illusionary? But the abductee understands that it may very well be both at once, both real and mental, real and illusory. The aliens, whether by intellectual, psychic, or technological means, are able to create any perception, and therefore any illusion, for the person in their custody. The implications are explosive. Perhaps it is why the logical conclusions of these implications are so rarely taken into account. If we credit the idea of illusionary mastery with serious validity, then we must either come up with a reliable acid test to discern illusion and actuality in abduction events, or we may have to admit that the truth behind these events is unknowable in current scientific terms. Dealing with the aliens' deceptive abilities may be the most crucial problem facing abduction research today. Once this illusionary capability has been demonstrated and experienced, new perceptions and insights often emerge. The witness usually has no trouble recognizing the non-human nature of the forces behind the events. The manipulation of time and space by these beings, the way they play with our psychology and perceptions, all bespeak a technology far beyond the human. And certainly, if any human agency did have this sort of capability, it would have plenty of applications far better than pulling hundreds of 3 a.m. raids on bedrooms around the globe every night, decade after decade, in which thousands of human agents pretend to be aliens. The data from other cases and my own experiences force me to reject the G-men in lizard suits scenario propounded in some quarters, for there is no solid evidence yet presented which would support the idea of strictly human agents masquerading as aliens in order to confuse and mislead us for some nefarious purpose. Alien abductions began with me as early as 1951, for example, and with my husband in August 1947, only 2 months after the Roswell crash, and it would be a very tenuous presumption to think that our own government had such illusory capabilities at the time. The abductee also learns from experience that the aliens induce an altered perceptive state in humans during every encounter. Employed for control, it can be used to prevent any undesired responses from the abductee. And the altered state also prevents any objective assessment of the situation by the witness. This means that the witness can only report what was seen, felt, and heard, which is not necessarily a reflection of what actually occurred. By inducing and manipulating altered consciousness in the abductee, the aliens assume full control of the situation and thus exert great control over the data reported by the witness. Abductees report alien-controlled information. This is a fact abduction researchers must face. Then, perhaps, work can begin on solving this problem, on finding ways around the memory blocks and screen illusions, in order to discover the real events and the agenda behind them. Until the day we can unmask the alien illusions, however, we can at least study the entire body of reported data, controlled though it may be, trying to learn more about why certain images and events are employed and what they can tell us about the cover directors of these scenarios. First, what types of events are comprised by the phenomenon? An overview of reports from a large number of abductees shows several types. On the most immediate level of a physical abductions, in which a person is forcibly removed from the normal environment by alien in the most generic sense of the term entities, the person's awareness is altered, and some interaction occurs. Subsequent conscious memories of the event are usually quite incomplete. Only when the event is witnessed by more than one person, or when there are physical marks on the abductee's body, punctures, scoops, patterns of bruises, artificial designs, does the witness usually feel safe in asserting the reality of the encounter. Reports also show that some interactions occur on a mental rather than a physical level. One type is an artificially induced virtual reality scenario (VRS), an externally introduced event that to the witness is practically indistinguishable from objective reality. The person may experience a situation with full sensory input and react with genuine physical and emotional responses, although in reality the person may be lying immobile on an exam table, or sitting attached to some alien apparatus, or even asleep in bed with no outward signs of disturbance. While the virtual reality scenario may have been a matter of theory in the past, a possible explanation for some of the more unacceptable abduction accounts, it has now been confirmed in a 3-witness, conscious event. It came to light when I was investigating the experiences of Ted Rice, a psychic of excellent reputation throughout the southern states. All 3 participants have been interviewed at length and have given signed, witnessed statements, all very consistent, about the event. The virtual reality scenario occurred when Ted Rice was in Florida visiting a friend, Marie, along with another house guest, Amelia. The 2 women occupied twin beds in one room, and Ted slept down the hall in another. Not long after going to bed one night, he was awakened by Marie shouting for him to come quickly. Heading down the hall, Ted saw a pervasive blue glow emanating from Marie's bedroom doorway. Entering, he found Marie standing up, pressed against the far wall, staring at the twin beds in shock. And he saw where the blue light was coming from. Amelia lay immobile in one bed, surrounded by a huge, blue, glowing, electrical sphere of light. Her eyes were open, and she didn't seem to be in any distress as she carried on a conversation with someone Ted and Marie couldn't see. Terrified, they tried to talk to her, but they could hardly hear one another even when shouting. Amelia continued to speak within the sphere for several minutes, until the blue light suddenly disappeared, at which point she was finally free of the paralysis that had kept her in the bed. Amelia told Ted and Marie that the experience started with the sound of a helicopter low over the house. Looking up from the bed, she could see through the ceiling and roof, as if they'd disappeared, to where the odd helicopter was hovering just above the house. She described two entities in the craft, whom she said also appeared at the foot of the bed before the blue light vanished. One entity was tall, with greenish alligator skin, an egg-shaped head, and slanted eyes as the only visible facial features. The other, shorter, entity, Amelia said, was a blue-black color similar to a raisin. Ted and Marie had seen absolutely nothing of these creatures, nor had they heard a helicopter at any time. But they had seen the sphere of light, with bright, darting lights shooting through it, and Amelia frozen in a slightly raised position inside it, for she had been starting to sit up when the light coalesced and paralyzed her. Amelia's perception of the experience was completely real for her. She was conscious when it began and throughout the entire event, as Ted and Marie attested from everything her sensory input told her. Amelia had experienced an actual event with the craft and the two entities. Virtual reality. And the conscious and unaffected witnesses, Ted and Marie, observed objectively real effects of the mechanism which manipulated the event, verifying its external origin. Virtual reality technology exists and is in use, this much is clear. And unless there are outside witnesses, such as in this rare instance, the experiencer cannot personally discern between the VRS and an actual event. The VRS may occur while the person is conscious, as in Amelia's case, or it may be introduced into the person's dream state. According to those who've experienced the VRS dream, and I am one of those, it is an intrusive event that suddenly interrupts a normal dream. The experiencer is aware of a total, abrupt change in consciousness and finds himself in an event altogether different from his dream. What follows may be a perceived event, with action, location, and personnel, or it may be a communication or even a vision. At its conclusion, the experiencer normally awakens, and, finding himself in his own bed, he rationalizes the whole thing as an extraordinary dream, in spite of the event's decidedly non-dreamlike qualities. Without physical proof of the event's reality, or even a name for this altered perceptive experiential event, he is left to call it a dream. In addition to the abductions and virtual reality scenarios, abductees also report telepathic contacts from entities who are not perceivably present. These contacts include messages about spiritual matters, warning of future disasters, teaching sessions, displays of symbols, and information on mathematics, physics, religion, politics, and the nature of the human species. On a secondary level, there are events that occur, not during encounters, but pursuant to them, affecting things in the abductees' normal environment. Lights and electronic equipment malfunction. Unexplained voices and sounds are heard. Animals are physiologically affected. Lights appear both inside and outside the house. There are odd and disturbing phone calls. And sometimes traces of a UFO's presence or landing on the property are discovered. And finally, there are the internal changes that take place with most abductees, reshaping their attitudes, belief structures, and perceptions of reality. Thus, the externally induced, temporary, altered awareness which occurs during abductions is paralleled by a permanent, internal alteration, and the abductee's life is forever changed. These types of events and effects, then, delineate the abduction phenomenon, but it is also important to look more closely at some of the specific details that are recurrently reported yet not generally presented to the public as acceptable parts of the scenario. To illustrate some of these, I want to show you a detailed comparison chart of experiences reported by the 8 women whose accounts are presented in my book, taken. Preliminarily, it should be noted that these accounts come from 4 women who have undergone no regressive hypnosis and 4 who have had some hypnosis work in their investigations, but in all cases the details on the chart come primarily from conscious recollections. All 8 women reported UFO sightings, childhood missing time, adult missing time, conscious encounters, virtual reality scenarios, remote telepathic communications, and the involvement of other family members. 3 of them reported missing time episodes affecting more than one person. A variety of physical alien types was reported, with all 8 women citing the greys, 7 of them describing the whites or insectoid types as well as robed or hooded figures, and 6 saw entities with blonde hair. 6 women also reported cat-eyed or lizard-eyed entities. 5 saw creatures with wrinkled faces and what appeared to be hybrid adults. And 4 encountered dwarf or elf-like entities. It is notable, too, that 3 of them reported blue beings and Jesus-type figures. Of the various types of exam procedures, 7 women reported the use of various unknown instruments and the interaction of aliens very closely in their faces, almost nose to nose, as one woman described. 6 women underwent physical exams and recalled ear implants, while 5 women reported gynecological procedures and brain operations. 4 recalled nose implants and the use of a wand-like instrument, as well as the presence of a lady doctor. 3 of the women saw surgical procedures performed on other captive humans and were also made to eat or drink substances during abductions. Only 2 women had missing fetuses, and 3 recalled seeing a small box-type device, usually black, used in their exams. Under the heading of activities, all 8 women said the aliens communicated some sort of information. 6 women had teaching sessions with the aliens and also experienced levitation during their encounters. There were 6 reports of baby presentations, 5 reports of abductees passing through solid objects not always during the abductions, and 4 reported forced sexual activity. 3 of the women were shown or told about the cloning of human bodies, and 2 of them were even shown their new bodies, although they were given different explanations of the uses intended for the clones. During alien communications, 6 of the women were told they were chosen or special, and 6 received lessons about the separation of the human body and human spirit or soul. 5 report warnings of coming disasters, as well as hearing strange words pronounced by their abductors. 4 were given specific names of the alien entities. There were 4 reports of hearing singing or music, and 3 women were warned that it would be dangerous to touch the UFOs. In the settings for these encounters, 7 women reported seeing humans present, and 7 reported seeing military personnel among them. Views or visions of the Tan world or a desert planet were witnessed by 7 women, also, and 5 recall being taken into underground facilities occupied by both aliens and humans. In the category of bodily effects, all 8 women recorded patterns of unexplained bruises and noises in their heads or ears, while 7 of them experienced nausea after encounters. 6 women have the well-known scoop marks, as well as sensations of light exploding in their minds, puncture marks, and clothes mix-ups. 5 of them reported unexplained scratches, rashes, sudden total fatigue, the feeling of having been beaten up, and blood on their bodies in their bedclothes they could not account for in mundane ways. 4 of them suffered eye irritations, 3 reported episodes of vibrating sensations, and 2 women experienced hair loss. Concerning the external effects, all 8 women had recurrent instances of electronic disturbances, telephone disruptions, unexplained lights in the yard and miscellaneous sounds in the house. 7 of the women saw lights inside the house and heard unidentified voices, while 6 reported multicolored lights and specific humming and buzzing effects. 5 women have had repeated helicopter activities above their homes, and 4 have seen the small balls of light normally described as probes. The after effects category shows that all 8 women experienced sleep disorders, a strong shift in their attitudes, and intense desires to locate in rural areas. 7 of the women reported 3 types of dream events, including dreams of massive numbers of UFOs arriving, dreams of disasters, and prophetic dreams. In the category of personal information, all 8 women have had psychic experiences. 7 of them have Celtic ancestry while 6 have Native American blood. These figures would certainly be different, however, for abductees in other parts of the world. 6 of the women had gynecological problems too, while only 3 of them reported any childhood abuse or family members with affiliations to military or civilian intelligence agencies. From this chart, we can see that the phenomenon involves much more than crossbreeding activities and spiritual elevation. And although these details shown here come from only 8 cases, they are repeated in numerous other abduction reports. The main areas I wish to emphasize concern: 1. The frequent experience of undergoing brain operations, which has nothing to do with crossbreeding; 2. The forced sexual encounters, with varying scenarios from case to case; and 3. The repeated accounts of military human personnel and the underground facilities. These details are rarely reported or given much credence by most researchers, yet they are numerous and often come from UFO virgins, that is, people with no previous UFO information. As researchers, we must allow that these reports are honestly provided, completely real to the abductees, and as much a part of the phenomenon as those details that have already gained wide acceptance. Correlations of numerous reports especially demand that serious investigative attention be given to the sexual encounters and cloning reports, as well as to the nature and extent of human activity within the phenomenon, because they all indicate a physical, rather than a spiritual, agenda. In fact, the whole body of abduction evidence makes a strong case for a very physical, technological basis to alien-human interactions. But unless angels perform rectal probes and make crank phone calls and arrange sexual liaisons in addition to the other heavenly duties, the case is very weak for this being a primarily spiritual agenda. As we assess the phenomenon's past and ponder its future, there is another important consideration. In spite of what some prominent abduction theorists tell us about avoiding thinking in terms of positive and negative, when it comes to the alien agenda, this simply cannot be done, nor should it. From our relative perspective as humans, a condition conferred upon us by the Supreme Creator, we have both ethical and practical considerations. On this basis, I define positive as that which is beneficial to human concerns and negative as that which is harmful or detrimental to those concerns. We approach every other consideration in our lives from this perspective, and the alien human agenda should not be exempt. For my family and myself, for the women whose experiences were charted above, for all abductees, knowing that we have been made a part of this agenda and that we have been implanted and trained and programmed to participate in some future scenario, how can we not ask to what purposes our minds, bodies, and souls will be used? It is foolish to put aside our rationality, our learned wisdom, and our ethics to trust the words and actions of beings whose nature is kept hidden from us and whose agenda involves the entire world. We should also be concerned to learn what can be done to alter the abduction situation, and I am encouraged to see that some exciting new work is moving in that direction recently. Is there any sign that things are changing? The answer is a cautious yes. There is evidence of a change in the standard operating procedure of abduction events over the last 40 or 50 years. On the part of the aliens, there seems to have been a quantitative and qualitative increase in abduction activity since the mid-1980s in this country. Whereas most events in the past were deeply suppressed in the abductees' memory, by 1986 hundreds, if not thousands, of abductees began to remember past experiences and to be more currently aware of new ones. Either the aliens were not doing a good job of suppressing the memories, or something was triggering a wake-up call in the abductees. And different alien types, not just the greys, were reported much more frequently. An argument can be made that this awareness was initiated deliberately by the aliens, as part of the preparation for the predicted coming global event in which abductees will be activated to perform their tasks. But a different argument can also be made, that abductees were waking up on their own, many times seeing through the illusions and virtual reality scenarios, as did one of the women I report about in Taken. When a tan-colored entity was projecting love toward her, the woman responded, "Too bad it isn't real." In several recent reports, in fact, Abductees have successfully penetrated the aliens' illusions and refused to cooperate as the aliens would have had them do. The growth and changes resulting from alien contact may yet prove to be a double-edged sword, giving abductees heightened awareness and psychic perception that allows them to evaluate and react to their situations in ways they could not have done before. Any species, in an environment of extreme stress and questionable survival, may develop new coping mechanisms to ensure that the species continues to exist. Could this be part of what is happening now? Certainly an intrusion of an advanced, controlling force on a widespread scale could generate enough species stress to trigger new response mechanisms. Studies of human consciousness development theorize that the emergence of bicameralism, the division of the psyche into conscious and subconscious components, occurred relatively recently in human evolution, perhaps no more than 5,000 years ago, in a fairly sudden way and with no known precipitating cause. Could it be that we are once again experiencing a psychic change, a movement toward tricameralism that will give us a new form of conscious perception? Are we developing new abilities to recognize energies and entities which have hitherto been beyond our ken, and thus new ways to respond? Many people who see alien interaction as a positive event for humanity point to the growth and changes abductees often evince as proof that the aliens are working to elevate the psychic and spiritual abilities of our race. Angie, one of the women in Taken, has said, echoing the reports of numerous other abductees, "I have grown in many ways. My IQ and receptiveness to learning has improved a lot, and I am more in tune with nature as well as myself and other human beings." Defenders of alien interaction claim that these sorts of changes are a deliberate product of the contact experience, evidence of the aliens' benevolent interest in humanity. It is odd, however, that such growth seems to come to abductees only after they are aware of their experiences. If indeed this growth is produced by the aliens, then it should have been there long before the abductees were conscious of their encounters, since in almost every reported case there is evidence of alien involvement since early childhood. The psychic increase and growth of perceptive abilities, however, occurring after the abductee is aware of the intrusions, may indicate a different genesis and internal evolution of consciousness stemming from our need to know what is and has been done to us and what we can do to meet the situation in a more empowered state. Survivors of great catastrophes such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and war may be crushed by the impact of these events, losing their usual ethical considerations and sense of self that is the basis of psychic stability. Or, as Dr. Robert J. Lifton has discussed in his book, The Protean Self, they may find a new resilience, rising to the occasion and reacting with abilities they didn't know they possessed. Given the vast intrusive activities of the abduction scenario, our species may well feel such a threat or stress that a mutational or evolutionary leap is occurring today, developing a tricameralism of the mind, allowing us to confront the intruders and see them more clearly than they have allowed in the past. On the basis of many recent abduction reports, there are grounds for hoping that our species is now awakening.